Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the final session of the NPTEL MOOCs course on development research methods. Let me begin by thanking each one of you for being a part of this course all throughout. I am not sure about the advantages that you may have had so far, or you will have in future for being a part of this course. However, my individual learnings out of this course have been immense and immeasurable. Let me also begin by thanking you for pointing out the errors in the assignments that we had uploaded, and we have sorted the errors from our end, and I hope your problems have been sorted. Please continue to post your questions on the portal, and we will try to answer each one of your questions in the last week of this course. Now in today's lesson is less of a lesson and more of a summary of the course that we have done so far. Therefore, I have titled today's lesson as a final note. What I will do in today's lesson is to give you a summary of all the weeks that we have covered, the lessons that we have covered in all the weeks. However, since the amount of the quantity of issues that we have covered as a part of this course is vast, what I have done is to bring out a selected few points out of the weeks, and I'll highlight those points in the form of a summary, although I'll also bring out the summarization of all of the lessons only in the way of bullet points by giving you out all the lessons that we have done so far. So in the list of lessons that we have done in week 1 are as follows. So week 1, lesson 1 was on reflections on development studies and development research. So as a part of this week, I contextualized the development research methods course as being a part of the entire broad part of development studies and development research. We brought out the differences between development studies and development practice. When do we say we are doing development studies? When do we say we are doing development practice? And I also pinpointed some of the very basic differentiating points between how development studies researchers conduct themselves and how development practitioners conduct themselves, and what are the practicalities with regard to the implications of development studies research and development practice. In lesson 2 of that week, we looked up the types, forms and processes of development studies research, and in lesson 3 of that week, we spoke about the rigor in development studies research, and we looked up this issue of as part of this week 1, we looked up this issue of when do we say that there is rigor in development studies, because often given the interdisciplinarity of this discipline called development studies and development practice, there are questions with regard to how rigorous are the research techniques or how rigorous are the research conclusions based upon the research questions that we are investigating. Therefore, as part of this first week, we looked up rigor in development studies research. In week 2, we moved into paradigms of development research, development work continuum, and action research in development studies. And in lesson 3 of that week, we looked up the issue of ethics in development studies and development research. As I was pointing out, in week 1, I laid down the theoretical and social context to studying development research methods. Some of the important questions that we asked were: what are the characteristic features of development studies, the scope of development studies, distinguishing between practitioners and academics, a brief idea about development practice. When do we say that we are doing development research? What does doing development research mean? What are the different types, characteristics and forms of development studies, purpose, goals and focus of research in development studies? And when we were posing all of these questions, you would have realized that I have often used the terms investigation of a development research question. Now, when we are investigating a development research question, the issue of paradigms becomes very important. Therefore, after raising these issues of what is it that we are trying to investigate in the form of a development research question, in the next week I moved on to the world views or the paradigms of development research. We also studied about what are the research methods and possible combinations in development studies, research process and research plan, rigor in development studies and assessing quality of development research. In week 2, we continued with the theoretical and social context to studying development research. Therefore, the week 1 and week 2 are linked to each other in terms of laying down the theoretical and social context. The questions that we considered are, what are research paradigms or the philosophical worldviews as we have come to know? We also asked the question with regard to, are the different research paradigms in conflict with each other? If we are following a positivist approach, let us say, then does it necessarily have to be in contestation with the interpretivist approach, or is there any middle ground? Is there a possibility of carrying out research making use of different worldviews, which brought us to the paradigm of mixed methods research as well as transformative research methods, the pragmatic worldview and the transformationist worldview. We also looked at the way forward from research paradigms. We saw how our research and practice linked in development studies. We tried to understand the continuum between development research and development work. We looked up what is action research, what is the significance of action research in development studies, questions of ethics in process of research for development, codes of ethics. We also discussed in detail about the responsibilities towards respondents, that when we are conducting our field survey, what is our responsibility towards respondents? Is it necessary for us to take our research back to the respondents, share our findings with them? What is the responsibilities to our colleagues with respect to sharing our research findings with that of our colleagues, and wider accountability issues when we are conducting development research? So, from the first 2 weeks, I'll try to focus on this framework for research, the interconnection of worldviews, design and research methods. One of the things, if you would remember, I focused on was the way forward from the worldviews to research approaches, and I did mention to you that there is an interconnection with respect to worldviews, designs and research methods. You would see that we begin with a philosophical worldview, whether we want to begin with a constructivist view or a transformative view, that helps us design our research design. So, whether we want to have a quantitative research design or a qualitative research design or a mixed methods research design, that is what is informed by the philosophical worldview that we are beginning with. However, the arrows go both ways, and you would see that the research designs also help us inform the philosophical worldviews that we want to take up. The designs then help us build on the research methods, the questions that we want to ask, what are the different kinds of data collection techniques that we want to take up, how do we want to carry out our data analysis, whether we want to focus entirely on statistical tools and techniques, or we want to have a more interpretivist viewpoint by bringing in theories, we want to take up grounded theory and so on, interpretation, validation. Each of these research designs and research methods have a different form of interpretation and validation. That is something which we have taken in brief as part of qualitative and quantitative research methods. And also the research methods move towards informing the philosophical worldview. So, in a way, when we talk about research approaches or we talk about research methods, we cannot just think in terms of the methods in isolation. When we are talking about methods, they have to be understood in conjunction with the philosophical worldviews and the research design that we want to take up. So, this is the final takeaway from when we are looking up the framework for research. Often early researchers struggle with the concept of, with the issue of conceptual frameworks of their research, whether it is in the form of a thesis or a research project. We are struggling with the concept of conceptual framework, and conceptual frameworks usually needs to keep all of these things in mind. What is the philosophical worldview that we have for our research design? What is the research design? Is the research design used for the philosophical worldview that we want to take up for our research question, and also the research methods. So, all of them together form what is referred to as a framework for research, and this is what I discussed in the interconnection of worldviews, designs and research methods. I also looked up what are the methods and tools that we use with respect to paradigms, and we are saying that there are research paradigms. What are the different methods and tools that we use? So, with regard to the positivist paradigm, the methods are primarily quantitative, and the data collection tools may be in the form of experiments, quasi-experiments, tests and scales, measurement scales. One of the limitations of our course is that because this course has been pitched as a preliminary, as a very as one of the very rudimentary courses on development research methods, we did not have the scope of entering into the details of measurement scales, or taking up or having an introduction to regression techniques, having an introduction to various forms of codings and so on. However, if possible, we may want to come up with a second edition of this course in which we would like to take up these issues in details, and which could form research methods part 2, and we are exploring the possibility, and we may like to float such a course. So, the positivist paradigm mostly looks up quantitative research methods. Although qualitative methods can be used within this paradigm, quantitative methods tend to be predominant. Now, this is something that as a student, as a learner of this course, we must understand, we must think about. One of the takeaways is that it is no longer important, it is no longer necessary for us to think of quantitative and qualitative methods as watertight compartments, but look up the interdisciplinarity of using both quantitative and qualitative tools in the research paradigms that we are taking up. With respect to the interpretivist or the constructivist paradigm, the methods are primarily qualitative, they predominate, although quantitative methods are also used. The data collection techniques are mostly interviews, observations, document reviews, visual data analysis, for example, photographs, videos and so on. The transformative paradigm uses both qualitative and quantitative methods, and therefore, we have a widely increasing and evolving domain of what is referred to as mixed methods research. These days, we have mixed methods practitioners because when we move out to the field and the kind of dynamics that we face with regard to the research questions, it becomes important for us to use all of these techniques to be able to analyze the research question, the development research question. So, the data collection tools are diverse. They range from, there is a particular need to avoid discrimination, and they range from various kinds of tools that can be used, and different kinds of models, visual models can be used when we are making use of mixed methods research. We did face a question on mixed methods research in the live interaction, and I would urge all of you to look up the lesson on mixed methods research that we took as part of this course. The pragmatic paradigm uses qualitative or quantitative methods, and methods are matched to the specific questions and purpose of the research, and it may include tools from both positivist and interpretivist paradigms. Okay, so as part of week 3 and week 4, the list of lessons that we had was as follows. In the lesson 1 of week 3, we studied about literature review. We looked up various kinds of literature review, literature study. In lesson 2 of week 3, we studied about the field worker and the field based on M.N. Srinivas, A.M. Shah and E.A. Ramaswamy edited book, The Field Worker and the Field, Problems and Challenges in Sociological Investigation. In lesson 3 of this week, we studied about introducing qualitative research methods. In lesson 1 of week 4, we continued studying about qualitative research methods, And in the rest of the lessons in the week, we studied about interviews and focus group discussions, participatory methods and approaches, conducting case studies and maintaining field diaries. Okay, so in week 3, when we looked up qualitative methods in development research, some of the specific questions that we asked were as follows. We asked about what is literature review and what are its different types, what is the purpose or aim of the literature review, what are the common types of literature reviews, what is systematic review of literature, how do systematic review of literature, how to do systematic review of literature. We entered into selective, I picked up selective phrases from the book, The Field Worker in the Field, and reviewed the book. And we drew lessons from this book with regard to how to approach the field and what are the things to keep in mind when we are approaching the field, when we are entering the field. We looked up issues on designing qualitative research characteristics, data collection and data recording procedures, qualitative purpose statements, theory use, inductive approach and data analysis in qualitative research, validity, reliability, generalizability and writing up. In week 4, we studied about, we continued with qualitative methods in development research, and week 4 had 4 lessons. So, we tried to cover a lot of aspects of qualitative methods in development research, although it was still wanting in more. However, it was beyond the scope of the design, the way we designed this course. The lessons, the questions we asked as part of week 4 was, we continued with qualitative purpose statements, theory use, inductive approach and data analysis, left over from the last week, week 3, validity, reliability, generalizability, why do interviews, different types of interview, the interview strategies and processes, what are focus groups, incorporating focus groups into a development project, how do we do that, participation in development, the concept of participation in development, what are the considerations for using participatory methods, the participatory methods that are in use, spreading the use of participatory methods. We looked up critical perspectives on participation in development. We studied about case study as a method and when to use it, what are the different types of case study research designs, the stages of doing case study research, what are field diaries, how to maintain field diaries, and diaries as a separate form of research method. Okay, so as part of literature review, one of the things that I wanted to focus on was linking up review of literature with different stages of your research process. So, we begin with an initial research question. If you look at the diagrams showing on your slide, we usually begin with an initial research question and then go on to do a review of literature, after which data collection takes place, data analysis and writing up. This is a usual flow that we follow during a research process. However, when we carry out systematic review of literature, it becomes a back and forth process, because often when after data collection takes place, we can review our research questions that we have taken up for analysis and then go on to refine our research question after the data collection process, and the same can happen during the data analysis stage as well. We might have begun with a set of research questions depending upon the kind of literature review that we may have come across, and the quality of literature review that we might have carried out. However, our data analysis might not give us the results that we anticipated, and in those cases we might want to go back to our research question and add a separate set of review of literature and then refine our questions further. It becomes very important for us to relate themes from review to our findings, and once the analysis takes place, the analysis prompts new reading and the writing up develops a commentary on wider debate. So, the literature review as a process is a very integral part of the research process, and it does not begin and end in the first stage. This is not the stage in which it definitely begins at this stage, but it does not end at this stage. Review of literature as a process continues till the writing up stage. and there is a need to link up the literature review for in each of the stages of the research design that we have carried out, and that's the significance of having a literature review. And as part of this literature review lesson, I did focus a lot on systematic review of literature as an upcoming way of reviewing literature, and particularly in the context of development literature, although other discipline in the sciences have also taken up systematic review of literature, because it helps us to refine our research questions in a very concrete manner. Okay, so here comes your some sort of a review of systematic literature review, or the summary of systematic literature review. So SLR basically identifies, selects and critically appraises research in order to answer a clearly formulated question. It follows a clearly defined protocol or plan where the criteria is clearly stated before the review is conducted. Comprehensive, transparent search conducted over multiple databases and grey literature that can be replicated and reproduced by other researchers. The search terms, search strategies including database names, platforms, dates of search and limits all need to be included in the review. And there are 7 key principles behind systematic literature review. They are transparency, clarity, integration, focus, equality, accessibility and coverage. These are the list of lessons that we did in week 5 and week 6. In 6 lessons, we introduced quantitative research methods. We had an overview of mixed methods research. We looked up the issue of field surveys and inventories, logical framework and SWOT analysis, the importance of census and other secondary data in development studies, and finally we ended with how do we communicate research, how well can we communicate our research that we have done, because often research, good research gets lost in not being able to translate our research into proper communication. Therefore, how do we communicate research, and understanding the politics of communicating research is also very important, which I think we focused in that class. So the questions that we asked as part of week 5 were as follows. Focus was on quantitative and mixed methods research. We looked up the relationship between ideas and evidence, the role quantitative data play in substantiating ideas. We looked up using quantitative data in advocacy, what is mixed methods research, types of mixed method strategies and visual models. Mixed methods research, with respect to mixed methods research, we looked up literature review, theory use, procedures for choosing a mixed method strategy, data collection procedures and mixed method sampling, report presentation structure, what is survey research, survey design and sampling, field surveys and inventories, and use of field surveys and inventories in development research is what we covered. In week 6, we took up the issue of logical framework approach. We looked up 2 main stages of using LFA for project design. We looked up SWOT analysis, the conventional approaches to conducting SWOT analysis, official statistics, fundamental principles of official statistics, historical perspective of official statistics in India, an overview of present Indian statistical system. We also looked up why it is important for us to study census and other secondary data, and why they are important in development studies. And of course, with respect to communication, we looked up communication and the research process, what are the constraints and political considerations while communicating research, and some tips to communicate research professionally. As part of this summary course, let me focus on 2 important things. One is on the relationship between ideas and evidence, and the other is some basic principles of using secondary data. I chose to just focus on these 2 as part of this summary, because I think it's important. Anybody who wants to work on quantitative data needs to keep these basic principles in mind. One is the entering into these twin dangers of upholding ideas without evidence, or more commonly defending ideas only with evidence which supports them, because these are prevalent in policy analysis, because ideas support the nature and direction of public action, and evidence consists of both quantitative and qualitative data. Hence, here the focus is on the role quantitative data can play in choosing between rival ideas. This was the focus of the lesson on Introduction to Quantitative Research Methods, where I repeatedly spoke about taking extreme stands of upholding ideas without evidence or defending ideas only with evidence. And often there needs to be a very rational choice made with respect to how to handle both ideas and evidence, how ideas and evidence needs to be used in conjunction with each other. And quantitative data analysis and looking at quantitative data, trying to put a story to quantitative data can make a world of difference when we are trying to bring up evidence and giving a story to the evidence that we may have collected. Therefore, this relationship between ideas and evidence is very important, and that the principles behind it needs to be understood before we can actually begin to start utilizing or implementing quantitative research methods or quantitative data analysis to the story that we want to tell. Now, what are the basic principles of using secondary data? These are some of the things that we discussed. We discussed that we must use the data systematically and creatively. We must take time to look carefully at the structure of a table, its various categories and the way they are cross-tabulated, the data matrix, so to say. We must reflect upon and note down any important conclusions we can draw about the limitations inherent in the data. We must fire questions at the data. Each question approaches the data from a very different angle. So, these questions need to be essentially theory inspired and motivated by the key components. Each question gives us a different handle on the data, and each handle allows us to look at the data and gain specific insights. So, we must follow up the questions that look promising. We may collapse the data so that it emphasizes the question we want to pursue, and we must not carry around any extra baggage in terms of data overload. Sometimes we have so much of data that we want to analyze, we enter into data fatigue, and a good development researcher who has her questions outlined properly, who has her research designed outlined properly, will ensure that one does not enter into a data fatigue phase, and by not carrying around any extra baggage with respect to data overload. And finally, we must be able to transform the data appropriately, and to be able to do all of this, we must have ensure that we have developed a capacity and a capability based upon the way we have designed our research, or based upon the way we have carried out our literature review, to be able to question secondary data in the first place. So, these are some of the things that we covered as part of quantitative research methods week. Now, as part of week 7 and week 8, when we moved on to week 7, my focus was mostly on operationalization aspects with regard to research methods. Often we come across various concepts, various frameworks, we have tools, we have and social sciences, particularly in the domain of interdisciplinarity, when we are taking up interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary issues, we are concept loaded, and there has to be a way of operationalizing these concepts. For example, when we say rights based approach to development, or when we say gender sensitive indicators, we talk about social capital assessment. Now, these are all terminologies that we want to use in the field. We want to have an assessment of each of these. We want to know whether a rights based approach to development has actually been taken up or not. But then often researchers in our field have a limitation of coming up with tools and techniques to be able to actually assess these issues which does not have a quantitative outcome. So, then what are the hurdles we face with regard to operationalization of these concepts? In this regard, I took up some very basic lessons on rights based approaches to development, poverty measurements and analysis, gender sensitive indicators, gender analysis, social capital assessment tools, and finally monitoring and evaluation frameworks. So, in week 7, the questions that we asked were: what is rights-based approach to development, the principles and concepts, operationalizing rights-based approach, challenges of implementing a rights-based approach, what are the different approaches to poverty, different poverty measures, multidimensional deprivation and multidimensional poverty index, also this movement and how theoretical perspectives change when we moved from the concept of women in development to gender mainstreaming, gender equality, gender analysis and approaches to gender mainstreaming, gender sensitive indicators, poverty and power, contesting perspectives with regard to mainstreaming and women's empowerment. In week 8, we looked up what is social capital, different types of social capital, measuring social capital measurement tool, monitoring and evaluation frameworks, and finally today's lesson on conclusion. So, with respect to human rights impact analysis tool, we looked up the NORAD 2001 tool on human rights impact analysis. We looked up the domains in which we can calculate, we can provide a score with regard to human rights impact analysis. The domains that we took up were awareness and empowerment. Some of the questions are: what is the program's assumed actual impact on equality and on discrimination, and then we provide a score. So, the legend for scoring is given below this slide. PI for positive impact, NC for no change, NI for negative impact, NA for no information available. Obviously, PI which is the legend for positive impact means that it is a better performing situation with regard to human rights impact. No change is a neutral position. Negative impact is what it says, negative, and no information available will have a different kind of an analysis with regard to the situation in hand. The other questions with regard to awareness was: has the population directly affected been informed about the program? Does the program respect or has it respected everyone's rights to seek and impart information relevant to its implementation? With regard to empowerment, the questions we asked were: does the program respect or has it respected the right to express views freely in preparation and implementation? Does the program promote or has the program promoted participation in decision making of groups affected? Does the program respect the right to just and favorable conditions of work? Similarly, on fulfillment of right to adequate standard of living or target groups and other people affected, self provision in terms of income generating activities, compensation for those negatively affected. So, these are a few questions that were taken up with respect to human rights impact analysis by the tool prepared by NORAD 2001, and of course, such kinds of tools can be developed and adapted to the country situations or the specific cases that we have for the sake of our analysis. We also looked up multidimensional poverty index, and one of the ways of operationalizing assessment of poverty situation based upon a multidimensional poverty index was shown as follows, following the Human Development Index. And I also mentioned that details of the multidimensional poverty index can be found in various human development reports that have come since 2002, and there are 3 dimensions of poverty that the multidimensional poverty index considers: health, education and living standard. And within them there are 10 indicators with respect to health, nutrition and child mortality, education, years of schooling, school attendance, living standard, cooking fuel, improved sanitation, safe drinking water, electricity, flooring and assets. So, the multidimensional poverty index is a departure from the earlier limited indices such as the Human Development Index, which only focuses on income, education and health, but here we have moved. Living standard is assessed not just by the proxy of income, but also in terms of the access to different basic utilities that people have. Some of the gender analytical frameworks that were taken up that we studied in some detail were as follows. We particularly looked up the Harvard Analytical Framework, and various other frameworks that can be considered are people oriented planning, the Moser framework, gender analysis matrix, capacities and vulnerabilities analysis framework, women's empowerment framework, social relations approach. We also looked up the focus. For example, in the Harvard Analytical Framework, the focus is on resource allocations for women and men. For people oriented planning, focus is an adaptation of the Harvard Analytical Framework for use in refugee situations. Moser framework focuses on women's triple role of reproductive, productive and community work. So anybody who is working on with these focuses, for example, if as a researcher you are more concerned about inter or intra household resource allocation for women, to determine the different impact of development intervention. Similarly, and to meet immediate needs, particularly want to use the capacities and vulnerabilities analysis by sectors, but concentrates on separate areas of social relations approach can be used for analyzing existing and power. Finally, we also where we saw that for being able to carry out a social capital the meso levels are usually very hard to measure at the even at the macro level, but the rule of law and the type of regime, the legal framework, levels of participation in policy processes and levels of structural, and this is how the macro and the micro level can be used in conjunction to be able to come up with a learners of this course to this website pub.com/cases. This website has been of immense use to me. One of the advantages of using this website distributes the different methods. There is a distribution of cover as a part of this course. So if somebody is interested in use this, follow this link to follow up the other. We receive you are interested more into looking up grounded theory issues, the actual implementation of this website is that you can also browse different research methods by discipline and by academic level. This is how we come to an end of this course, and I hope that the last few weeks have been fruitful to you. You have certain important takeaways from this course, and it will be of immense pleasure to me if we continue to interact with each other through different modes of communication, and hopefully we will be able to have a second edition of this course, which will give us an opportunity to go into the details of some of the research methods that I have highlighted. Till then, thank you very much for being a part of this journey. See you.